Welcome to the Deal Champs podcast. I am your co-host, Mr. Strat Daddy. My outfit got voted out today by Jason and Kyle. I did have a good apron on. You guys will have to wait for the content for that. But our entire mission here is to be able to show you guys how to grow your business and have actionable steps for you guys to go and take and implement. We bring on real operators, real business owners, real investors who drop absolute nuggets the entire time. And we really bring on these guests selfishly so we can talk to them and learn what we want from them. And so if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you guys are watching this, tell us where you're from. But real quick, my name is Stratton Brown. I own a 7-figure real estate portfolio. We own a company called Virtual Help. I got started in real estate 5 years ago with absolutely zero life skills, and it has absolutely changed my life. We have our co-host, who I'm quite disappointed in, the master of hair with no hair today.
Slumming it with the hat on today. I'm your other co-host, guys. This is Jason Pritchard. Thank you for tuning in. A little bit of background on me. I worked in corporate America for about 15 years. I burned all the boats and went full-time into real estate investing in 2014. Since then, we flipped close to 400 houses. We own a rental portfolio of over 100 units here in mainly Central California. Also have 3 Airbnbs. So I'm interested to hear our guest Kyle's take on the Airbnb market and the short-term rental market in Central California. And like Strat said, our goal, my mission is to try to transfer as many of the things that I've learned over the years to all of you guys listening and watching. So really excited to have Kyle on today. We've got a really hot topic. So I'll pass it over to Dean and let himself introduce himself, and then we'll go from there.
Captain America, you're muted.
It's because I was eating snacks. That's why when we started, I was eating snacks, so I forgot to come off. So guys, Dean Rogers here, your other co-host. My story is I transitioned from the NFL to corporate to then real estate, and been investing in real estate for a decade now. Just passed the 600 deal threshold, so we've done 600 deals. Have a rental portfolio of almost $10 million, and coaching students how to wholesale real estate. You guys can always connect with me at deanrogers.com. And today, not in the studio, I'm in our Sprinter van traveling. So it's mock studio today.
And then
the next guest is I got a crush on. So Strat Daddy, how about you introduce our guest?
So this is my business partner and really good friend, Mano Kyle, official Kyle Man, Stanley. The man, the myth, the legend, Airbnb king, Kyle. Kyle, introduce yourself for us.
Thank you, Padre de Strat, I should say. And Dean does squeeze my butt a lot, so it doesn't surprise me that he has a crush on me. I need to do more squats for Dean now. Guys, Kyle Stanley, right out of college, was a sports anchor. Thought I was going to be the next ESPN or Chicago Cubs play-by-play announcer. Realized very quickly I didn't like taking orders from other people, and we tend to call that an entrepreneur. So I got into just starting my own business, failed miserably in that for about 6 years, went into multi-level marketing for a little bit too. And then one day I woke up and said, life has to be easier than this, and found real estate. And now today, about 4.5 years later, between my wife and I, we own 15 houses in contract now on house number 16 and 17. And have a couple commercial, one commercial property with Stratton, which is awesome. And we got to check that out for the first time the other day. Built a 7-figure Airbnb business in about 2 years. And that was all during COVID as well. So excited to talk more about that today.
Kyle, is Airbnb dead?
That's a great first question coming
right
out
of the gate.
Right out of the gate, bro. Right out of the gate.
Punches.
Airbnb is not dead. I think if you try to cut corners and save money, Airbnb is absolutely going to destroy you. I'll just be raw and real. I've got a student right now that has tried to cut some corners and listed his house, very first house on Airbnb, and he's freaking out because he's got a big rent that he's doing an arbitrage deal on. Arbitrage is when you rent from the landlord and then sublease it out on Airbnb. And, straight up told him, like, where are your professional photos? And he's like, well, I'm waiting to get my first booking to pay for the professional photos. And I'm like, what? Like, no, 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 no. Like that has to go up right away. And you need to add more color. You need to do X, Y, and Z. And he's just worried about, saving money. And people who are doing that just are not winning in Airbnb right now. Meanwhile, we've got a property that is going to be half a mile from Notre Dame. And I told my business partner, for lack of a better term, I want people to look at that property and like just get a raging Notre Dame boner when they look at it. Like I want it to be just navy blue and gold all throughout. I want to see jerseys. I want to see the sports bar. I want to see football fields up on the wall. I want to see everything about
cool.
that. Yeah. And every single property in that area, guys, like they're just banking on being close to Notre Dame. And so you have people that are, I just think, majorly underperforming in that area, because when I come in with my boys for the weekend, like I'm looking for the best property. And cool, your place is updated and everything, and that's nice, and it's got some cool countertops and everything, but like I want to come in and go Notre Dame balls to the wall for the weekend while USC comes in, right? Like those are the things that I think people who are doing it right are killing it. And I've got a few stories that support that as well, if we want to get into any of that.
That's cool. I'm curious. I'm trying to remember, as part of your story, what was it that made you choose Airbnb? Like why'd you say Airbnb's the route for me? I'm going to get really good at this, as opposed to any other strategy that, we all do.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing is it was really organic. I've been doing Airbnb out of my house, for just a room out of my house to help pay for rent, from 2015 to 2018. January 6, 2019, I said, I'm going into flipping. A lot like you, Dean, I went through Fortune Builders, dropped a large sum of money, flipped my first house about 6 weeks later. And that was like how I saw myself. I was a flipper, right? And my second house that I got under contract, a good friend of all of ours, John Bustamante, he says, hey, you should hold this as a rental. And I was doing the numbers and I was like, okay, cool. It'll make about $600 after expenses. But like, that wasn't super exciting to me, right? Like $600 a month versus flipping this property for like 60K. I was like, I can't really justify that. So I started doing some research on Airbnb, and I was like, I wonder if an entire house would do well in Fresno. And I saw all these calendars in Fresno for 2-3 months booked out for like $150 a night. And I was like, in Fresno, really? And just started doing some research. And I was like, well, what do I really have to lose? Like, I'm going to put $7,000-$8,000 into the furniture. That's all I really have to lose. I'm going to try it. And sure enough, that first month, I tripled my net income on that property by doing it as a short-term rental versus long-term rental. And that's when I found out you can even do it without owning the house. And it's just like, all right, let's take this thing to the moon. But the funny thing was too, Dean, like even then I still was like, yeah, I'm a flipper. And like Airbnb is kind of my side thing. It wasn't until like people started coming to me and saying, hey, will you manage my house? Will you help me? At that point, I was like, maybe I'm short-term rentals first and flipping second. Now, like, I can't even remember the last time I flipped a house.
Yeah. So how long did that go to where you mentally were like, all right, I'm a flipper. I'm doing these type of deals. Okay. Yeah. Maybe some Airbnb stuff comes up, but like, how long was that process for you to truly know this was my unique, genius? This is what I'm really good at. This is what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that I'm in this room with Jason, because I talk about it all the time. And I don't know how much Jason knows I talk about this all the time, but when I first got my, I got like 3 or 4 short-term rentals, and I was netting about $6,000 or $7,000 a month with just 4 short-term rentals. And I had this like golden goose, and I didn't want anyone to know about it. And I was hiding it. And then I was at a meetup, and Jason stood in front of everyone and he talked about an abundance mindset. And I'm like, if you have something good, you should tell everyone about it and just assume that's going to come back to you tenfold if you don't ask for anything in return. And I was like, God dang it. Like, Jason doesn't even know me by first name yet. And I feel like he's talking straight to me. And so I just trusted that process. And I was like, I'm going to start telling people what I'm doing. And I told Jason, I told Stratton, Dean, you were actually one of the first people that like really asked me to like help out. You flew out from San Diego and we went and looked at some of my properties. And at that point, I realized like, okay, what I'm doing isn't weird. It's actually something that a lot of people want to learn about. And what I found after that, and this is where the abundance mindset that Jason talks about came back to fruition. Most people didn't want to do that work. They learned about it and then they were like, screw that. That's too much. Kyle, will you do it for me? And that opened up a whole new opportunity for managing for other people. And when I did the numbers, I realized like, hey, they can make more money. I can bring in about $600 to $1,000 a month on each property. And yeah, it works.
I can remember even asking you to co-sign on the comment that you just said, Cal. I remember asking you to come speak at a meetup, and I think that was the first meetup that I had done where we had talked about short-term rentals, because there was a little bit of a buzz starting to build out there, and you were the guy that did it, and you 100% came and just opened up your entire playbook. And I think to your credit for doing that, I mean, you were like the earliest adopter that I knew that was talking about it, right? And it just goes to show you how that law of abundance always comes back and reciprocates what you're looking for. You're the first one to get up in front of a large group that I knew of here in our market. And just I remember you pulling up, here's what I made, here's all this stuff. And I could just see all the light bulbs going off in everybody. Even in my head, I was like, damn, dude, you made that much money from this thing? I was like, I should have started doing this some more, dude. So yeah, that was really cool to hear not just you say that, but then see what it's manifested into since then, man. That's really awesome.
Thanks, man.
What gave you the confidence to like go so hard on it though? Because like you were first to market is the big thing that nobody really talked about. Before there was no one else like proving anything like, oh, this works. You were just like, hey, I kind of see something. I think I should really go hard on this.
I mean, like proof of concept. It wasn't really that complicated, right? Like I made on a small 2-1 in West Fresno in 93722 in the country. I was making gross $3,000 a month. Meanwhile, that thing would have rented for like $1,000 a month. So like that gave me proof of concept to know like, okay, if it works on this property, like what could it do on a 4-bedroom, 2-bath that's closer to the airport or like in like the heart of Fresno? And so, I'm thinking back to this now. I actually, as soon as I got that first property, right, I didn't have any money invested in it because it was a burr. So everything was paid for basically. Then I listened to a podcast and I heard these guys talking about how to arbitrage properties, how to lease them from other landlords. And I was like, does that really work? I did that with a 1-1 in 93720 in Fresno. And the same thing happened, right? I rented it out for $1,300 a month and I was doing about $3,000 a month on this 1-1. And that's when I was like, okay, 2 properties in a row. This is killing it. And I had a little bit of money. So I went and bought a property. I think I did 10% down as a second home. And then that was a 3-2. And that did even better than all of them. And so at that point, I was just like, all right, like I've got something and I have 3 different case scenarios of proof of concept. So that's all I really needed for the confidence.
Did you have like anybody you were watching that kind of gave you this roadmap, or were you just kind of winging it and feeling it out and experiencing it as you were doing it?
Yes and yes. So I went and I bought a course, right? And the course helped me to understand, especially with not owning the property, how to pitch to landlords. It taught me how to set up the properties. It didn't really teach me like how to talk to guests or how to get 5-star reviews or how to like really set up systems for turnovers and all of that. So I had to kind of just figure that out. And I think just a lot of me failing in business for the last 7 to 8 years kind of was my sharpening my iron moments, sharpening my axe moments, to where it was like, okay, I can kind of take like the things I learned in multi-level marketing to attract good teammates, the things I learned in this business that I owned over here to understand how to like really look at a P&L and understand where I can afford to spend money and where I shouldn't spend money. I should do the work myself. Like all those things kind of helped me to figure out those things along the way. But like to where it's at today and building a team and everything, no, I didn't really have anyone teaching me how to build the team or build the systems. I just had to kind of trial and error figure those things out.
So I know one of the things, Kyle, I remember kind of that initial meetup and then the light bulbs going off. And then I remember you kind of going on a run where things really picked up. Was your first biggest obstacle and challenge? Because all this was prior to COVID, right? And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And was that like the real big obstacle, the very first like big challenge that you felt as a short-term rental operator, just trying to navigate all of that? Or was it something else?
And I'm sensitive when I say this, but COVID actually helped our business. And
Yeah.
I know
Yep.
COVID was miserable for many families out there, but it really helped our business because it did a few things. Number one, it made me realize I never want to be a long-term landlord. Like I had to turn a lot of our properties into midterm rentals and long-term rentals for a while. And I mean, we had 2 domestic violence situations at one of the houses. We had people not
Forgot
paying
about
rent.
that.
Yeah, we had all
It
this
was
stuff,
crazy.
and it was just nuts. And I was just like, God, like being a long-term landlord, especially in California, kind of sucks. And so that was number one. And then number two was, we had about 7 properties at the time, and I turned 4 into midterm rentals, and I kept 3 on Airbnb because I just wanted to have a split A/B test. The 3 that we kept on Airbnb stayed 90% occupied even as March 13th happened. So March 13th, 2020, right? Like I remember that day, we had 12 cancellations that day. And for 7 properties, that's a lot. We got those rebooked within 24 hours. And for me, like I attribute that to Fresno not being a high vacation market, right? Like people have to still come to Fresno to check on family, to go and do business, for nursing, all these different reasons, right? And so right around July, everyone was checking in with me, right? I think Dean, you asked me, Stratton, I know you asked me, Jason, I think at some point you asked me like, how's Airbnb doing? And I'm like, it's killing. Like it's still doing really well. And from July until November, because everyone was asking how I was doing, they realized like, hey, this is surviving COVID. And if this survives COVID, then it's got to be the real deal. So from July to November, we took on 18 new properties, 16 of which we did not own, and we were managing for other people. And that's when it really, I mean, COVID was the reason it took off, but it was scary as all get up. Like, I don't know what I would have done. If I had 50 properties at the time, I have no idea what I would have done. So, I'm kind of glad we took a little bit of time to grow there.
But how did you even get through that? Because I remember like talking to you on the phone, and you're like, Strat, I think this whole thing is gonna just go down. You're like, I don't know what to do. I got to transfer them. And then even with that, the problems you had with the long-term tenants were absolutely insane.
Yeah, it was nuts. I mean, the day that it happened, I just started Googling like Airbnb and COVID, and I was seeing all these people posting about, especially from the UK and from all these foreign countries, like they were saying everything is shut down. No one's allowed to leave their house. You need to turn everything into long-term or midterm rentals right away, or else you are going to be vacant for the next, like potentially even year. And so I just got on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and I think I even posted something on OfferUp of like housing available. And I did it room by room for our 3 bedrooms, and for our 2 bedrooms, I just did one family rentals. But we were literally renting out each bedroom for like $600 or $800 per month, and then for the 2 bedrooms, we were doing like $1,500 a month. And meeting with as many people as I could just to see like, will you pay me at least for the next couple months to stay at this place? Cause I need to make sure the mortgage is taken care of. And a couple of those I was managing for other people too. So they were expecting me to make sure their nut was covered too.
So while this was going on, was it just, I know things have compressed and the market has contracted, and I know that we're going to get to that in this conversation. But at that point, once we cover and get past the hump of COVID, and we realize, man, this thing is really going to go, was it like a year or 2 of you just running and gunning and building out systems and hiring people and just trying to fine tune everything? What was kind of the game plan as you were scaling things up at that point?
Yeah. Just like what my dad taught me, crawl, walk, run. Like you don't have to go from 0 to 50. You can go from 0 to 10 to 15 to 20. And just as I took that kind of like just biting, not how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? And that's kind of the approach that I took. I was very blessed to have a really good person on my team that from the get-go, she started as a cleaner, but she was eventually like, I want to be your right-hand woman in this business. And she still to this day now runs the business. Like I put in an hour a week. And so she really just was like, all right, give me more, give me more, give me more. And as she was hungry, I just gave her more. And then when I felt her hit her max capacity, I said, okay, we need to bring in someone that can help you. Which part of this business is really like weighing you down? And she was like, managing the cleaners. So I hired one of our cleaners to become our cleaning manager. And then the cleaning manager eventually was like, hey, I've hit my max capacity. I'm like, okay, what's been tough for you? And she's like, checking on the quality of the property. So I was like, okay, let's hire a quality control inspector. And we made that position. And then eventually all of them were like, hey, we're having a tough time with guest management. I said, okay, well then I've heard VAs are a good thing. So let's go out and get VAs. And that was kind of just the approach that I took. I was always keeping a pulse on my team and asking them like, do you feel like you're overworked? If so, which part can we offload with maybe another person or another technology to help make this easier for you? And in doing that too, like, I don't know, I just feel like you guys probably feel this way too. It's if you give your team a place to be heard and you actually take action on that, then the loyalty that creates is just massive. Like every time we have a weekly meeting with my team, like one of the things that my cleaning manager says all the time, she's like, I'm so blessed that I have this job. I don't know what else I'd be doing right now. And I feel like a lot of that just comes down to making sure that the team is heard. And the cool thing about that is, you know, that goes down to the cleaners and the handymen and everyone in the business, because when I tell my COO, hey, are you feeling heard? Have I addressed your issues? She goes and she does the same thing with our team. And I know I went off on a tangent there, but essentially, Jason, like, yeah, I was just kind of feeling it out and trying to figure out like what spots of this business can I offload? And then when they hit their max capacity, what can I offload from them with a new person or new technology?
So what I'm interested in is kind of digging a little bit deeper into the business itself.
Mhm.
I know you rattle off a lot of these things because you've gotten so good at them. For me, I'm listening to it and trying to relate it to my business and the systems and processes that I have. What are some of the key things that, you know, someone who's wanting to have success in their Airbnb business and run it the right way, what are some of like the key foundational things for someone to have success with Airbnb specifically?
Yeah, well, 2 years ago, you could put a teepee up on Airbnb and make money, right? Like I just put a video up the other day. Things a 2021 host would say. I put it up on my Instagram, and like I even put a welcome sign on an unfinished shed in my backyard and said, "Look at my new Airbnb." Like literally, 2021, you could put up anything on Airbnb and make money. Now today, that's just not the case. So you have to know your numbers. You have to either get really good at deal analyzation, or you have to bring someone in on the team, or maybe even a partner that can take care of that side of it. Because, I mean, every single house that is listed on Airbnb, the difference between one that is at 123 Main Street compared to one at 246 Main Street, right next to each other, could be as small as like one just has a heated pool and the other one just has a regular pool, or one has that second living room where the other one doesn't have that second living room. It's the most minute things now that you have to have an understanding of, and you have to know. Like when I look on Airbnb or I look on AirDNA is essentially the MLS of Airbnb, and it'll show you the comps. What is good data? What is bad data? Why is this comp performing so well and this comp over here is not performing so well, even though to me they look like the same kinds of properties? You have to know all those things going into it. And so one of the things that I recommend to people is, you know, kind of do what I do. Start off with the lowest hanging fruit, which is what's like a really safe play. Maybe it's a room out of your house. Maybe it is a 1 bedroom, 1 bath ADU that, you know, you have a lease coming up and you want to get rid of the tenant. Or maybe it's even, you know, a landlord and they've got, you know, an ADU or a 1-1 or a complex that you can rent one of the studios or the 1 bedrooms out. Like just get in the game with something that's the lowest hanging fruit and be willing to know that like you're going to learn through some failures, and that first deal may not be the money maker, but it's going to give you all of the experience and all the knowledge to know, okay, here's what guests don't like, here's what guests do like. Now I'm going to go build the super Airbnb, and I know exactly what I'm looking for now. So does that answer your question, or did I?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. I'm curious. So it sounds like the numbers, definitely understanding the numbers, really critical up front. Makes perfect sense to me. With my business, it is all about the numbers. Once you've penciled the numbers, beyond that, when you're trying to like keep this Airbnb property functioning and producing, like what are the key things that you have to do inside the home or even online to make sure that you're going to like knock it out of the park and stand out and be hitting the expectations you probably are, dreaming for?
Well, inside the home, I wish I could tell you just like the cookie cutter answer, but it really comes down to who are you serving. So like we just, for example, that Indiana property, right, that we just got next to Notre Dame. All the houses that I was kind of bashing on a little bit ago, those would work really well in Fresno. Like it's clean, it's well furnished, it's nicely updated. Maybe one has a pool, one has a hot tub. Like those would work. But I feel like next to Notre Dame, the ones that I've seen that are really performing are the ones that like are really pumping out the Notre Dame stuff. Like that's what the guest really wants to have. They want to have the Notre Dame experience inside the house because it's next to the campus. If I'm in a beach property, right, I care the most really about location. I could be beachfront, or I could be one street from beachfront, and beachfront might be making 3 times as much as that one that's one street away from beachfront, right? Those are the things. That's who I'm serving, though. Like I need to understand exactly who I'm serving. So the best way to do that, once again, like understanding who you're serving, just get the lowest hanging fruit. Or even, I love networking with other hosts in the area. Like, what are things that you're seeing that are working really well for you? And I'm not just trying to take them to lunch and pick their brain, and the whole pick your brain thing. We all love hearing that, right? I want to add some value too, right? Like, hey, I'll come in and I'll help you with guest communication. I'll come in and I'll clean your properties for a little bit. Like, what can you do to add some value to these hosts to get maybe some of their knowledge so that it feels like it's a two-way street? From the online perspective, right? Like Airbnb has a major algorithm, and you need to know what that looks like. You have to have professional photos. You have to have the right number of photos. You have to have them in a certain order to make sure that you're marketing the place correctly. You have to have that place priced correctly. If you aren't priced correctly, if you're too low or too high, you're probably stabbing yourself in the foot. And one of the things I love hearing from people is I listed my house on Airbnb and I got the next 3 months booked within 3 hours. I'm like, that's great. Congratulations, but you're priced too low.
Too low, yeah.
Yeah. You're missing out on tons of income. And I want to still give you a round of applause, but like, let's fine tune your pricing a little bit. And then of course, like reviews, especially with all the competition now, getting as many reviews and getting to Superhost and staying at Superhost has become, to me, more important than ever.
Are those experiential properties, Kyle, the ones like the Notre Dame one or the beach one? As a owner or a manager, do you prefer those? Because like when I think of Notre Dame, I think, all right, you're going to crush during football season, right? Mm-hmm. But what the hell else is happening in South Bend all those other years? So do you like those properties where it's like big peaks and valleys where you're charging premiums and you're busy for half the year and the other year is a little bit more slow and steady? Or as an operator like you that's been in the business for a long time, is something like a market in Fresno where it's more kind of business class? You got people that are nurses, insurance work, traveling people. Which of those profiles do you like, and which one would be good for somebody that's new, that's thinking about getting into Airbnb?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And there's a reason I'm in both of those markets, right? Like Bass Lake would be another one. In July, we have properties that will make $20,000 to $30,000 at Bass Lake. And then in October, they'll literally do like $1,000 or $2,000 because like no one's going there. I like that secondary after I've built my strong foundational business that I know is going to be cash positive just about every month. That's not the same for everyone, right? Like at the end of the year, you look at the numbers and Bass Lake is going to way outperform any property that I have in Fresno. But I also know that I'm going to lose money 4 months out of the year in Bass, and then I'm going to make crazy good money only about 2 or 3 months out of the year. And
you got to make it the whole year.
Yeah, as long as I'm good at like being financially savvy, then I can save some of that money. But I personally like the strong foundation of just like predictable income. And then after that, like, okay, let's go and let's have some fun with this. Like I was looking at a property in North Carolina that was listed for $850, but potentially could do $200,000 of gross revenue per year. And I'm like, this is kind of scary for me because it has one exit strategy: short-term rentals. Like if it gets banned, if it gets saturated, long-term rentals, not an option because my mortgage is going to be $6,500, $7,000, somewhere around there. And a long-term rental in that kind of house would do $3,000. So that was a little scary for me. Same thing for Bass, right? Like I probably wouldn't cash flow too much with a long-term rental for that same one that's doing $20,000 to $30,000 in July for a short-term rental. But typically for those is when I really like to say, okay, maybe I'll own 1 or 2 of those, but I'd rather go and manage other people's properties and get a little piece of that without any of the liability.
Kyle, do you have any in the ghetto like Noah and Mitch? Because Mitch is, I think, famous to us for having Sin City on Airbnb, and then Noah having one just down in the hood and like right by downtown and still crushing it with the Airbnbs.
We stopped doing that for 2 reasons. Number one, again, when we talk about hearing my team hated it. They didn't feel safe. They didn't feel like they could go there after dark. They didn't like, the 1910 build in Tower and how, it had some funky stuff about it or just had all those repeat issues. And one of the things about those older houses too is that a guest will in their minds equivalent that to cleanliness, right? They see the old baseboard. The baseboard's not actually dirty, but they just think it's dirty, right? Those are the things that we kind of started to notice. And for that reason, our team wasn't earning bonuses because of cleanliness. And so they were like, we just don't want these houses anymore because of safety and because we're just not able to keep them that clean. So that was number one. And number two, they just stopped performing, right? Like a lot of those houses in Fresno, unless it has something unique about it, a lot of people just realize, hey, I have a lot more stuff that I can book in northern Fresno that is nicer, newer, and I'll drive the extra 5 to 10 minutes if I'm coming in through the airport if I know I'm in a nicer neighborhood. So we got rid of a lot of those. Some of those were tough conversations with landlords, but most of those landlords already saw the writing on the wall that they weren't doing very well. So they were like, yeah, I'd rather turn this into a long-term rental anyway. So we actually scaled back a lot in the last year. We were at our peak, we were at like 57 properties. Now we're, I think, at like 45.
And
what is the
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I was going to ask because you had said something earlier in regards to higher regulation, right? So I think when we look at a surface level, sometimes you see about short-term rentals and the big catchy articles are like, oh, this city such and such bans Airbnbs and short-term rentals, and there's all this doom and gloom. Is that, I mean, obviously it's a concern, right? But is that more inflated by the media as like one of those things, or is it like a real thing that you and some of your students are seeing where cities are going in and just saying, nope, you can't do this anymore?
I would say that's becoming more of a real thing, but cities, for example, like Dallas, I think is the most recent one. They come in, they say, we're banning everything. Well, they really only banned single family homes for now, and they're still allowing short-term rentals in multifamily complexes. But that piece of it still has to go to a vote, and there has to be, everything has to be within state rules. And a lot of those state rules are probably going to state like, no, you can't tell someone how to run their house. So I don't see Dallas continuing that ban. And once it actually gets to the vote. And there's a guy, his name's Theron Lewis. He's really good on regulations and everything. But one good example is like Atlanta. Atlanta said, hey, we're banning short-term rentals. And then like 6 months later, they're like, never mind, you can only have 2 licenses. So you can only own 2 short-term rentals. So there's a lot of like that stuff going on. And what I'm seeing, especially in, not to get political, but the red states are typically, if they ban it, they grandfather you in. And that's what I really like. And that was part of why I was also looking at North Carolina, was I was seeing a lot of the cities around it that had banned it, they grandfathered everyone in. So I was like, okay, cool. If I get one while it's still allowed, then I've got something that when it does get banned, now I don't have to worry about saturation because there's a cap put on it. So I think that's the key, is like looking for the areas that maybe have some, again, when you talk about proof of concept, maybe there's some cities around it that have proof of concept of like when it was banned or it was outlawed, that they grandfathered you in. And that's kind of why I like Fresno as well, is because, Fresno is typically the last to do anything in the state of California. It always seems like we're like 3 years, 4 years behind everyone. And the reason for booking in Fresno is not vacation. So we have a lot less of like the bachelor parties, the bachelorette parties disrupting the neighborhoods. As long as you're a good host, you should be able to eliminate a lot of the parties and the neighbor issues. And so for that reason, I feel like Fresno is going to be a place that, especially because there's like no hotels that are any good in Fresno.
I was going to say, I can't be a huge hotel lobby out here, like pushing a city council. Like I could see it in a destination town or a big city like Dallas, where it's really cutting into the bottom line of some of these major companies. They're getting some pressure from, exactly. Yeah. They're getting pressure there. Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting insight.
But yeah, again, when we talked about the numbers, that's also important, like knowing if it's allowed in your market, or if there's like, one of the things I tell people is call the city, obviously look online, see what it says about it on the city, but still call the city and see, is there anything coming down the pipeline about talks of banning or out or kicking Airbnbs out of town. And that's, to me, a very important part of the due diligence process.
What do you think about the idea of buying, and maybe you have one of these, do you have a property that's like your vacation rental that you use it as like your family rental property? That's one of the things that's always been in my head. I want to get a beach house, or I want to get something up at Shaver or whatever, and just have it and then rent it in Airbnb. Is that a good like model to have, or should, if it's just Airbnb, just keep it on Airbnb, don't use it with family? What's been your experience with that type of stuff?
Well, that Bass property that I was talking about that did 20,000 in July is one that we own. We bought it January 2022 with a partner, and between myself and the partner, we've used it a total of 2 days since we bought it because we're just like, you know what? Why would we go and use this property when it's going to make $800 a night?
Yeah, that's true.
July, and that's really,
you're only going to want to use it during the prime time anyways, too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's right. You do have to make that decision. I guess.
Yeah. So I think if you do that, right, like the idea is you have to identify, is this an investment property first, or is this a family property first? And if it is a family property first, you need to realize every time you go there, there's going to be something that's just going to like catch your eye, and it's going to take your mind off of actually being on vacation, right? Like you're going, oh man, what's up with this baseboard? Why is it banged up? Why didn't anyone report this? Now I'm pissed off and I'm only here for 2 days and it's ruined my vacation, right? Like those are the things that you kind of have to like, do I want to mix pleasure and business? And that's why I just recommend everyone, like, all right, if you're going to do it, don't self-manage. Like go, and if it's that kind of property, right? If it's a one-off and it's just a family vacation spot, don't self-manage, hire a manager so that you don't have to like have all this emotional attachment into the property.
Yeah. That's a great point. We got a question here. In order to use someone else's property, you list the property on Airbnb and manage the property. Is there any type of insurance you can use while using your house as an Airbnb? So it looks like a two-parter.
Okay. In order to use someone else's property, you list the property on Airbnb and manage. Yeah. So I list it myself, even though it's owned by someone else. I list it myself. It's on my profile. I think that's what they're asking. And then, type of insurance for sure. There's a lot of options out there. 3 years ago, really like only proper.insure was one of the only ones for short-term rentals, but now like Allstate and State Farm and Farmers, they all have short-term rental products now. And so I always just suggest go and talk to an insurance rep and ask them like what products you have and how do you want to see, if I'm going to do it with someone else's property, how do you want to see me listed on that insurance?
With all of
Cool.
the insurance pulling out, what has it been like for all of you guys? As far as like the insurance
California?
companies at the beginning of the year. Yeah. Like kind of freaking out and pulling their money out of like Florida and California.
Yeah. I mean, we still have options. I mean, a ton of them pulled out, but like, you know, really stuff went up 20%, which isn't a huge deal, right? Like our premiums were $1,000 a year. Now they're $1,200 a year. So it hasn't really affected us that much.
Going back to the question that the viewer posted, your model, correct me if I'm wrong, is more management than arbitrage. Is that right? And are you still doing a lot of arbitrage, or is it more management? Because management feels to me like you're mitigating some of your risk, right? Because if it isn't bad, like you can just have a conversation with the partner, and if it's not working, then you can just come out of that agreement. Once you're committed and you sign that lease, right, you are kind of committing more, even if it's a bad property. Can you expand on the difference between the two?
Yeah, I personally like management over arbitrage because of what you just said. I don't have a lot of risk going into it. And if you own the property, I can convince you to add the hot tub or to upgrade the kitchen counter or to, you know, change that second living room into a fourth or a fifth bedroom, right? I can make those changes by showing you what the ROI is going to be. Whereas with an arbitrage, what I see is what I get. And especially doing something expensive like adding a hot tub for $7,000 to $8,000 when I'm only in a 1-year lease isn't really something that I'm quite ready to do unless I personally see the ROI. I like to see if I'm going to arbitrage a property, am I going to make my money back at least by month 9 so that in the second year of that lease, I'm going to make straight up cash flow, right? But if I'm not going to make my money back by at least month 9, to me, that's a little bit too risky of a property. And to your point, Jason, like this last year, we got rid of 3 arbitrages because we noticed coming up to the lease, the last 3 months, we were actually cash flow negative on them. Whereas like with a management property, if that was just one that we were managing, well, they probably would have been like, well, we'll just keep it on Airbnb and see how it goes because we own the property and at least it's covering the mortgage.
Is the ROI that much higher? I mean, what would be the reason why you would want to go the arbitrage model versus the management model? Or are you like in the right market? Can you get a 2 or 3x return on arbitrage versus management?
Well, let's just take one of my students who's in Lodi. He's been killing it with these like 4 or 5 big bedroom new construction properties. And so he's renting them for right around $3,000 a month, and he's grossing $8,000 a month. Add in, you know, the utilities and everything, he's netting $4,000, right? If he was managing that same property for $8,000 at 20%, he would only be bringing in $1,600. So, you know, there's a $2,400 gap per month. So in that situation, arbitrage, like, yeah, I'll furnish that property. I'll put in $20,000 because I'm going to make my money back in what, 7 months, right? So for me, I'm fine with that kind of deal for an arbitrage. But if I'm like, hey, I'm going to make $1,000 or $1,500 a month as an arbitrage, I'd much rather just try to tell that owner, like, can I convince you to furnish this and we'll just manage it for you?
Do you do any co-hosting to where like you just split it straight up or no? Or is that
Well,
the same thing?
that's yeah, co-hosting is the fancy term for management. So
Okay.
yeah, they're one and the same.
One of the things, dude, that I've seen as I've just observed you go on your run that you have, you're very, very consistent with your social, like as consistent as anybody that I've ever seen, dude. And so what has your investment into YouTube? You've got a massive Facebook group, right? You've built this really awesome community. Like what are all, like, how has all of that impacted your business?
Yeah. First of all, I paid to stay consistent with it, right? Like I have a video guy and he keeps me very accountable. He's coming over tomorrow. He texted me today that he's gonna be here tomorrow, and I'm like, crap, I forgot you're coming over, but I got to do it. So like those are the things that I think, especially in this world, right? Like you guys have seen it, like it pays to be consistent with not just real estate, but also on social media. And yeah, I mean, when I talk to a landlord and they're like, why should I hire you? I can send them my YouTube channel. I can send them my Instagram, and they can like learn straight up, like this guy knows what he's talking about. And so it does a lot of the selling for me. It builds instant credibility. And it's built relationships that I never really envisioned that I would have, and that's been pretty exciting, just to, again, right, going back to that abundance mindset, like just giving things away for free, and it's opened up doors I never thought would open.
Real quick, let's give a shout out to these comments. Shout out Kyle Miller, Hex King. When you're looking to buy into another area that you're not familiar with, is there any program you recommend, like AirDNA? Like, what is your software stack when you are evaluating like something new?
Yeah, it's AirDNA. It's really all that I use. A lot of people talk about like Mashvisor and a few other things. AirDNA, but again, AirDNA, you really have to know what you're looking for. And AirDNA just did a whole revamp of their software. At first, I hated it because anytime someone changes something that you're used to, you're just going to have those pain points. But then I realized, like, wow, this actually is a lot better because it gives away so much more information. So I would say to someone, if you're looking to use AirDNA, first of all, I have a really simple market eval kit that teaches you how to use AirDNA to evaluate a property. It's just $27. You can go check it out at fearlesskyle.com/market eval kit. But some of the key takeaways that I'll give away for free right now is, number one, number of nights on Airbnb for the last 12 months. It has to be at least 200, ideally 250. Because if it's less than that, it means it's either too new of a property, or this person blocked off a ton of dates because they lived in the property for a little bit, or they were renovating it, or they were doing something with it. And that's not enough data for me. Number two, it has to have at least about 15 to 20 reviews to show me that this has been on Airbnb long enough. One of the things that AirDNA doesn't do a good job of, and this is, again, how we tell what's good data and what's bad data, AirDNA doesn't do a good job of being accurate all the time. So when they say, hey, this property was listed for 350 days and it made $115,000, and then I click on the property and it has 2 reviews, I'm like, well, that's not true. So I have to do my due diligence to make sure that it's actually been an established property. And then number 3 is I'm going to look at their calendar for the future. Does it have what we call a healthy or a broken calendar? Meaning, is it fully booked or is it fully unbooked? That would be an unhealthy calendar. A broken/healthy calendar would be, here in November, we've got 7 of the next 9 days booked. And then in December, we've got 12 of 30 days booked. And then in January, we've got another 3 or 4 days booked. That would be a broken and healthy calendar. And that shows me that they're still getting bookings and this is still looking good for the future. That would be the kind of comps that I would then use to then say, okay, can I find 3 to 5 comps, find the average of all of those, and plug it into my calculator, which is going to show me how much I'll make on a month-to-month basis or a year-to-year basis at this property.
What does the next, I'd say, 3 to 5 years look like for you as a high-level Airbnb operator? Like, what are you seeing the landscape? Is it going to continue to get more difficult? Or are we going to get more pressure from cities? I felt like there's been kind of an exodus, at least when I look at the number of available bookings that were available in our market in Fresno. Like maybe 2 years ago, when things were like really, really hot, I feel like there's been an exodus of a lot of people that got into the market and realized, man, this is more work than I thought it was going to be. The return isn't really what it was, right? Are you going to see more of that? Are you bullish? What's Kyle's thoughts on the future of Airbnb?
Just like everyone becoming a realtor in 2021 and 2022, right? Like a lot of those people are no longer realtors. So for that reason, like I think 2021 in short-term rentals was not nearly as good as everyone thinks it'll be for the future. So 2021 was crazy good, and I don't think that'll be sustainable. But I don't think second half of 2022 to really like present time in Airbnb is as bad as it'll be for the future.
Thanks, man.
I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. I think 2019, if you look back at numbers, like every once in a while, Jason, like I'll be like, oh man, it's just not doing as well as it used to. And then I'll look back at my 2019 numbers and I'm like, oh, I'm actually doing better than 2019.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy, right? Like I forget the reality of it because we just had such a good 2021. So for me, my next 3 to 5 years is I really just want to own as many properties as possible. I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, all right, I've established the management business. It's growing on its own. It's stable on its own. Now it's time to really work on, the equity and the net worth, which is why we're closing on 2 properties right now. And I'm looking to close on at least another 3 or 4 next year, especially in the creative financing space. That's a place that I really want to go hard in. And to your point, like I look at Fresno right now and I see a lot less available listings on Airbnb. So it's already trending in that direction. But also on the creative financing side, I mean, I think we have 1,000 listings available for purchase right now in Fresno and Clovis. Where like 6 months ago, it was like 400 or 500. I think there's going to be this perfect marriage right coming up of being able to buy properties on terms and continue to use the short-term rental exit strategy.
So I'm curious, like what are some of the most exciting projects you've either done or are going to be working on? Because I know one of the things that catches a lot of people's attention is like the experience type of Airbnbs. Do you have any of those projects you've done? Or I know you mentioned the Notre Dame one. Is that your first one? Where are you at with like your favorite projects?
Yeah, I would say coming up, we have Christmas lights being put on our house. I don't know if you can hear all this noise on top of me. All right, good. Coming up, the Notre Dame house is by far my most exciting project. And
cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be awesome. And this is just kind of where the mindset shift has been for me. Like I'd rather do a lot more with a lot less. I'd rather put my heart and soul into one property, fly out to Notre Dame a couple times and make sure this is done really right. And know that I'm making $500 or $5,000 to $6,000 a month, then just have my plug and play going where I'm making $1,000 to $1,500 a month and doing 5 or 6 of those. So that's kind of the most exciting for me. Another property that we just purchased is a new construction one in Kentucky. It's right next to Red River Gorge, which I had no idea what that was until I talked to the realtor. And apparently it's just like this amazing tourism place. So we want to put our heart and soul into that one too. Ones in the past though, I mean, definitely the property that I own in Bass Lake, we converted the garage into a game room. And we just really decked out the whole thing. I think we put in $80,000 into the renovation, and it's beautiful. It's got the boat slip. It's looking out over the water, and that performs really, really well. So, that's been a fun one too.
How important do you feel like it is to, when you have an Airbnb, to make it set up for a family, to make it set up for one individual, to make it set up for a group of people going? Because I know the Airbnb in Notre Dame, it sounds like, hey, this is a boys' weekend. We're going to the game. Like, let's have a really great time. But then you mentioned like, hey, maybe one of the best ways to start is by having a room available. So tell me what the landscape looks like for you, at least the way you think about it. Like what's the ideal avatar that you're setting up for? And maybe you have a couple.
There's not many answers I have cookie cutter answers for, but this one really is. And the rule is more heads in beds equals more money. I haven't found any situations where that's not true. And that's not always conducive to be a good neighbor per se, because, if I have a place that can fit 20 and it's a 4-bedroom, what kind of guest am I going to get there? But like, there's a place in Fresno. It's not one that we manage, but there's a place in Fresno that did like $120,000 last year in revenue. It's in the Fig Garden Loop. And I'm telling you, this house, there's nothing special about it, but they have bunk beds galore. And it says in the title, can fit 20 and is great for parties. and this guy gets like $400 a night and he's always booked.
Damn.
And I'm like, okay, that's great. You're willing to put up with those headaches. And I talked to him at one point and he was like, yeah, my neighbors aren't really my best friends. So, you know, that's where I kind of have that inner battle of like, do I really want to deal with all those, or do I want my team dealing with all those issues? But if you're looking to maximize profit, then like, yeah. And that's like one of my goals. In fact, this Kentucky house would have been great because it doesn't have any neighbors, but it's just not big enough. One of my goals is to like just have a house in the country on 3 acres where there's like nothing going on around it and people can just throw ragers if they want to, and no neighbors will have any issues. And we can fit like 30 people in there. We almost had that place in Clovis where it was this like 6-bedroom, 3,500 square foot home. And we were just going to try to fit like 25 people in there. It was even going to be good for like wedding venues because it was on 2 acres. But the owner ended up pulling out last minute. But I've always wanted to just try one of those and just see how it does, because my theory is that it would just kill. But I have had actual like proof of scenario where it's like, okay, this 4-bedroom fits 8 and this 4-bedroom fits 14. And you just see the massive difference in revenue.
Kyle, tell us about your new podcast.
Yeah, I'm wearing the shirt. It's the Setup Man podcast. It's a passion project of mine, not making any money with it. It's not a business. It's just fun. I'm a huge baseball fan. So I'm just interviewing some of my favorite baseball players and coaches and former players, current players. Yeah, it's called the Setup Man. And if you're a baseball fan, you should go check it out.
Hell yeah. Kyle, where else can people find out more about you?
fearlesskyle.com or Fearless Kyle on Instagram is probably the best place to go for it. On YouTube, if you like long form content, The Fearless Investor.
What's your Facebook group?
Now called Short-Term Rental Masterminds, or STR Masterminds.
Sweet.
We got called by Airbnb and they said, you are in violation of our.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
They weren't jerks about it. They were very nice about it. They were just like, yeah. So like all these places that you have branded Airbnb, you have to change to STR. It's like, okay, I can do that.
Must be nice though, just to make it on their radar, dude. That's a dub for you, man.
That's
like,
what
I think it is. Yeah, I think that's great, dude.
Yeah, sure. One of those things I was like, okay, cool. Like I can change stuff, but the sad part is we've noticed a huge dip in like searchability.
Yeah, because you won't get the SEO. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. We were getting like 50 to 60 new people per day in our Facebook group, and now we're at like 10 to 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any more questions, guys?
No, crushed it, dude.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Bro, thank you so much for coming on, Kyle, man.
Thanks for having
Dropping
me,
nuggets. Airbnb isn't dead. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And thank you guys so much for those of you guys who came to the meetup last week. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.